the last exchange, official exchange between Hitler's Third Reich and the Russians was the purchase of a trainload of grain. And then they cut off all kinds of contact with them and went to war. And just recently, of course, the Russians have decided, well, they're not going to accept U.S. of A. chickens anymore. No poultry products are allowed.
They also shut down their gas supplies to Germany and Poland because of repairs. The message is quite clear. Is there anything in your data about World War III? With the Poland missiles and Caucasus War and attacks on Iran or whatever? Nothing, huh?
Not per se. We have the military running a little bit ragged, and we have military as a very large context that comes on up and maintains all the way through this release period. So we could be looking at the beginning of that, but if so, it would probably be akin to the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand in the 5 or 6 months that followed that prior to the actual outbreak of hostilities.
It didn't immediately trigger World War I, no.
Correct. But around here these days, of course, we don't have the luxury of slow communication to allow everybody to cool off. So in this case, we might see the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, and then day by day by day by day, the visibility of the whole thing happens to the point where there is no cooling off. Now, at the end of this release period, which is the 19th of February, we get a very small period, I think, of some 21 days or so of building tension language with little tiny bits of release language in there, and then another slight drop in the release language again, and that sort of stair-step shark tooth pattern continues for about 4 or 5 months, but most of that is around a combination of terra intrusions, maybe in the form of a global coastal event. Now, and that could be either too much water or maybe not enough water. There's rumors now coming out that in observational anecdotal evidence that we're getting new snow on top of old snow unmelted from last year in the Rockies and maybe even in the Cascades. If that starts then and continues, then it actually builds up the very base for what could become new glaciers. And that process can be quite rapid.
Right.
So it might be possible that we would see a significant reduction in global coastal high tide by even, say, a foot or so, or the reverse. We still have all of the cracking of the glaciers and so on in Greenland, and that's going to impact us next year. Just about the time we get into our food crisis in a serious way.
All right, looking back over the years you've been doing this, is this the you mentioned that this is unprecedented, a 5-month buildup like this, vis-a-vis the amount of release language and the intensity of it and the trailing on of it for so long. Nothing else on the radar really comes close. This is kind of the big.
Yeah, for instance, let's go to the big one that'll stand out in everybody's minds, which is the September 11th attack. We actually had release language of greater intensity, but only lasted for about 11 to 12 days. And then stair-step again, as we all tried to absorb it, but it didn't continue for 5 months. So, no, we've never run across anything.
That's a remarkable overlay. So the September 11th release language lasted 10 or 11 days, approximately?
It a little over 11 days. I mean, almost 12 complete days.
When people had dealt with it, and that was...
No, they hadn't dealt with it, but they were no longer expressive. They were now starting to internalize and get back into some tension mode and try and absorb it all. But the huge gasp of the horror of it all was pretty much out by then.
And yet you find this 5-month period to be a gasp and a horror of it all kind of a thing?
Or some level of release language, that is to say, we're all responding to new events occurring.
We'll be right back. To next month, I guess. It's curiosity and all the rest of it. But
well, we've got to do something. Might as well keep busy and enjoy ourselves as we go along here.
Yeah. What about food for this winter? We talked about energy. Anything more on the food crisis?
Yeah, we have a lot
out of the headlines now, but that doesn't mean anything.
It'll be back, and not only will it be in terms of rationing and shortages, but part of that's going to be driven by we're getting the shortage aspect, and then under in supporting sets we've got collapse of the food chain within the oceans, and then we're having breakage of the food chain relative to grains. So probably it's going to relate to the bee issue and the lack of pollinators.
But not the floods of Iowa. That was isolated.
minor relatively compared to what we're seeing in the future. In fact, we think that the revolution stuff we've been seeing for 2009 and the summer of hell in 2009, all of that a lot of that may be driven by a major food crisis, which occurs over the winter and early spring.
All right.
So we are talking shortages. We're talking impacts at weird kind of levels, such as, for instance, ingredients for supplements not being available due to issues in some other country relative to that particular part of the bios.
Not the Codex Alimentarius thing, where they're trying to outlaw those supplements.
We're seeing all of those, and those control mechanisms are going to be desperately pushed. But in the end, most of those are gone by the end of 2010 as we get into that particular set of chaos. Yeah, the powers that be are losing their grip rapidly or are surrendering it. I mean, there are those who are going to say that they're just going to sort of withdraw to their holes in the ground and await out whatever 2012 brings.
All right, now that's another thing that we're going to spend time on. And by the way, Clif will be with us as a regular once a month, the first Monday of each month, the last hour of the program. But this 2012 thing is very concerning.
Sick, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's being marketed, it's being merchandised, and we know, all of you know, that the powers that be are going to not miss this golden opportunity to do something on a huge scale. I mean, this has fallen right into their laps. Of course, they knew about it long ago, but they are going to use this like you've never seen anything used before. The drumbeat of 2012 is going to become louder and louder and louder.
Well, we're seeing the effects of it already, and look at your previous guest here. I caught a few minutes there, and the number of times that he was expressing how he feels about this pending and potential revealing, if you will. He's getting extremely excited about it, and that feeling is permeating a large segment of the population.
This is, I mean, you can... the Christian fundamentalists are going to be rapturizing about it.
There you go, yeah.
And that's one group. I mean, the New Age people will be another. This is going to go on and on. I'll tell you, fasten your seatbelts, folks, because believe it or not, and some people say that the Mayans simply ran out of room on that stone. That was it.
Well, now
they're surmising
a
lot of things. I mean, I don't have an answer for you. I can just tell you what I hear.
Well, of course, there's the Aztec sunstone, which is in the main area of the museum in Mexico City, from which we get the original interpretation of the 4 previous ages and then the current age and the shift that occurs on 2012. But we also have all these really curious synchronicities. For instance, there's 33 degrees in your standard Mason, if you will, hierarchy, correct? If you multiply that by the number of nautical miles per degree on this planet, 60.039, you end up with 2012.9. So the 33rd degree, 33.33 degrees, where the Masons would have you go, or 1/3 of anything expressed in a 4-digit decimal, multiplied by the number of nautical miles, yields 2012.9, which gets us into the near closing time of that particular calendar. Then we find that Pope Gregory had his particular mathematician ended at 1111 on that particular day, which is 1/3 of 3333, and it's one of their symbols and so on. So you start getting into it all. They're expecting something. And at this point, there's so many rumors and quasi-substantiated, the paper trail goes so far and then kind of like fades away a bit, but at least there are some solid evidence that there's been a lot of work put into underground buildings and this sort of deal, right? And a lot of money siphoned off in huge amounts out of the black budget.
Correct.
And they're not doing that, and it's not showing up with, giant purchases of beachfront property somewhere, this kind of thing.
No, they're going down.
Yeah, I'm sure there's graft everywhere, but a lot of that money is actually just sort of disappearing. And so, of course, it's into a large hole in the ground.
It's going underground, quite literally and figuratively.
And we see now that there's large purchases of long-store foods, and that this is a long-term trend, and it's even gotten to the point where we have starting to generate its own rumor stream about it.
Boy, this poor dumbed-down American public is going to be putty in the hands of anyone who wants to really manipulate and massage this thing. I don't...
Well, they're going to have to go through some rather difficult times. As we all know, when we come to getting into a personal level of enlightenment, opening up our eyes and saying, geez, everything I've been told about the world is wrong, I'd better start educating myself